So are you interested in making a refreshing batch of hop water? Well, I made 2 batches with slightly different processes. Why don't you stick around, see how I made them, and let's see how they turned out. So if you've never heard of hop water, well, it is kind of what it sounds like. Basically carbonated water with hops added to give character, flavor, and aroma of the hops. There are a number of variations of hop water, or hop tea. Hop tea can be made with actual tea, say black tea mixed in with it, along with the hops. In my case, I just made hop water, water with hops. One variation of hop water is to add a little bit of sugar and some yeast to get a little bit of fermentation character. I didn't go that route this time, although that's something I want to try. So for these batches, I tried to go for a pretty simple method. So batch 1, I went for a hop steep method. Basically, I heated up an amount of water, I added my hops, and then I steeped them for 20 minutes before transferring into the keg. In the second batch, I went for an even simpler process. I basically just added the hops directly into the keg, kind of like a dry hop, but there's no fermentation stage. They went directly into the fridge where they steeped, and they're still in the keg. There are plenty of resources on the internet if you're looking for more information on making hop water. Clawhammer Supply has a number of videos, and they followed a couple different processes, including some where they've carbonated and added sugar and yeast to them. So Brewlosophy has a pretty good article on making hop water. That was a lot of the inspiration for the one that was keg hopped. There's also a subreddit called R Hop Water. It's not that active, but there is some good information there. When I brewed my first batch of hop water, a couple years ago, that's where I got my information from. So I'll put some links down in the description about those resources. If you have some other resources on making hop water, make sure you let me know. Also, if you follow different techniques or these techniques, tell me how your hop water has turned out. Are there any additions I could try to give a little bit more character? Well, before I taste this, let's give a quick run through of the brewing process. I'm brewing 2 batches of hop water today. The goal is to fill both of my 10 liters or 2.6 gallon kegs. So I start off with around 6 gallons of water, or 23 liters. I don't make any water salt additions. I do add half of a crushed Campden tablet to remove chlorine and chloramine that's in my tap water. I then add some acid to lower the pH. Sometimes people use lemon or lime juice, which are acidic. I decided to give citric acid a try. 5 grams of citric acid seemed like a decent starting amount. The goal is to drop the pH to somewhere below 4.4. The 5 grams of citric acid ends up dropping me close to 4.1. So, seems like I could have used a little less of the citric acid, but that pH should be fine. Well, I hope. For both batches, I'm using Amarillo hops. The plan for batch number 1 is to steep 1 ounce of Amarillo hops in about 1 gallon of 180 degrees Fahrenheit water. So that would be about 28 grams in 4 liters of 82 degrees Celsius water. I could have heated up the entire volume of water, but I figured that heating up just 40% of the water would mean that I would not have to mess with chilling the water before adding it to the keg, since 80% of the volume will just be cool water. Once the gallon of water is heated up, I add the 1 ounce of Amarillo hops into a sack. I let this steep in the water for 20 minutes. Coming back about every 5 minutes to give it a stir. During that time, I sanitize my kegs. I suspect sanitation is not quite as critical with hop water as it is with brewing beer. There's not any sugars to support wild yeast or bacteria, and the hops have some microbial properties. It's probably a good idea to make sure your equipment is clean and sanitized. Note that the tap water I'm using has not been boiled. After the 20-minute steep is done, I remove the hop bag. I give the bag a drain and then a light press, trying to remove all that hoppy goodness. This water then goes into the keg, and I top up the keg with treated water. Well, that's it. 1 batch is ready to go. The second batch is even more simple, and it was actually done while the first batch was steeping. So I start by topping up the keg with treated water. So rather than adding the hops loose into the keg, I decided I would use a hop bag. I add a few marbles in with the hops to make sure the bag did not float. So I add 2 ounces or 57 grams of Amarillo hops into the bag. Note, this is about twice as much hops as the first batch. My plan is to suspend the bag from the lid of the keg. That should help keep the bag away from the dip tube. To do this, I use a stainless steel worm drive clamp that I attach around the pressure relief valve in the lid. This strategy seems to work out pretty well, and the clamp holds the bag firmly to the lid. Then I just lower the hop bag down into the water and put the lid into position. Done! That was sure fast and simple. I then move both kegs into my beer fridge, where I will let them carbonate. I do purge the headspace a few times with both kegs. This is another area that I'm a little unsure about. I'm a bit paranoid about avoiding cold side oxidation for hoppy beers. Is oxidation a risk with hop water? I'm not sure. Note, I don't take any steps to remove oxygen from the water that I'm using. One thing I've learned with hop water is it takes a week or so to take shape. On day 1, the hop water has an astringent bitterness with lots of green vegetal character. This was even more pronounced in batch 2 where the hops were added directly to the keg. The hop sack I use in the keg is a bit coarse, so maybe it was letting through too many hop particles. The first several glasses of that batch had hop particles that settled in the glass, where batch number 1, where the hops were steeped in the kettle, was ready to drink earlier. Alright, so I have 2 different glasses of hop water here. Well, I actually have 3 different glasses. So batch number 1 was the one where the hops were just steeped, kind of a whirlpool edition, in the bag and then pulled out before I added them into the keg. The second one was the one where I added the hops directly into the keg. I want to give a quick evaluation. So my keg setup, I have everything set at 12 psi, kind of about 2.6 probably volumes. That's what my system will support. I have to run all my kegs at the same psi, and I have some beers on there. So I think ideally maybe hop water would be a higher carbonation level. I don't know. I've had carbonated water on tap at that same psi. It seems like it's okay. If we look at the appearance on the 2 beers, so it's interesting. I don't know if you can see it. The one that was steep definitely has a little bit of a haze to it, where the one with the keg hops is very clear. During sampling the first several days of the one that was keg hopped, there definitely was a lot of particles floating in there. This one looks pretty crystal clear. I don't see any hop particles in there. Well, let's evaluate these ones on aroma and taste and general properties, and then we'll see how they compare with the other one, where I mix 50-50 of both batches. As far as aroma on them, I would say the aroma on them is very similar. They both have more of kind of a dank, hoppy aroma. It might be a little bit kind of a green hop aroma, but kind of in a good way. So if we go in for a taste on these 2, so there's definitely some differences there. So again, so the one that was keg hopped has twice as much hops. That could impact as well. I kind of thought just because it was added cold. It definitely has a little bit more of a bitterness to it, which is a little bit odd, right? Because you think it's just added cold. There should be no bitterness in it. It's got a little bit more of kind of a hop astringency to it. Not really that stands out in a bad way. Or I feel like the one where the hops were steep just has more of a balanced kind of hop flavor. So they're both good in a different way. I'm not quite sure which one I like better. This might be a good chance to try out the one that was both. So this beer is a 50-50 blend of the steep hops as well as the ones that were keg hopped. So what do I think about the 3? Which one do I like better? The one that was mixed? I do think it's a little bit more balanced. It's got the character of both the other 2, which you would expect. The steep one I felt like just has a little bit more kind of a balanced hop flavor. The one that was keg hop, I felt it maybe had just a little bit of a brighter hop note to it. So this one, I think, kind of combines the both of those. It gets rid of a little bit of that astringency that I was getting in the one that was just dry hopped. Adds a little bit more hop character. So I think in my next batch, I'll probably take some lessons from here and combine the 2 processes. So steep some hops, and then I also add some hops into the keg. So in this case, it was a 2.5 gallon batch. I did 1 ounce in the steep, and I did 2 ounces in the dry hop. So I'd probably just do 1 ounce in the steep, and then another ounce in the keg hop. So a couple questions I have. 1, is this just an enjoyable beverage, right? Hops steeped in carbonated water? Because there's lots of other options for carbonated water. You could maybe add something like mint, just add some citrus to give a little bit of flavor. Something I've done in the past is just keep carbonated water on tap, and then I can flavor it in the glass. That would be a little harder to do with hop water. So I would have to say that in this case, it's probably a little bit of a personal preference. It might be an acquired taste for hop water versus, say, carbonated water with citrus flavor or maybe some other flavorings in it. So question number 2, is it a good kind of beer substitute? Say you're craving a beer and you're just kind of thirsty and you want that flavor. Or say maybe you're eating some spicy Mexican food or maybe a burger that you feel like goes well with a beer. Would this be a good substitute? Because one thing I've found, when you're eating food and beer together, the calories can quickly pile up. I think it's a pretty good fit. We've got basically a 0 calorie, zero alcohol substitute that goes well with those kind of foods, and that's where I felt it works well. So I can drink one of these, say with lunch or with dinner when I got some more plans, and it works out really well for that. So if you're someone who's used to drinking, say, light beers as refreshing, this might be something for you. It's got just a little bit of nice hop character, a little bit of hint of beer, kind of fits that spot pretty well, I think. So question number 3, is it a good way to evaluate hops? Say, could you just make a batch of hop water with a new hop you wanted to try out? And would it give you the character of that hop? In this case, I used Amarillo. Did I get good Amarillo character from these? I'm not sure if I do, but that's a question I want to come back to. So what I want to do is go into a series of videos where I look at different ways to evaluate hops. Is it worth putting the time and effort into brewing, say, a single hop pale ale? What about just steeping hops in water and maybe spiking beer? Or dry hopping, Bud Light? In this case, I'm going to try to dry hop some Corona. Or what about hop tea? Is that a good way? Does this give you the good character? If I was doing Citra versus Amarillo, would I be able to pick out which was which and make that determination? Yeah, that's a hop I might enjoy in a beer. So if learning more about hops is something interesting you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, once I get some videos together, I'll go ahead and put a playlist up in the corner. But for now, check out some of my other content. Cheers! And here's to building great beer.